TK421, mic check, mic check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Brooks? Mic check. TK421, why are you not at your post?
Is this working? Try that? Good. Apologize for being a little late. We had a gathering on the Senate steps, and I hope that Senator Schumer will be able to join us. I thank my colleagues for joining. This meeting will come to order. 4 years ago, we witnessed one of the worst assaults on democracy in American history. It's a day that forever changed our nation. On January 6, 2021, a violent mob summoned by a bitter, defeated former president ransacked the Capitol complex, leading to the deaths of 5 police officers and injuries to more than 140 others. Later that evening, we returned to the Capitol and certified the 2020 election results. That should have been the death knell of Donald Trump's big lie, his baseless claim that the election had been stolen. But within weeks, the bipartisan resolve to defend our democracy was gone. My Republican colleagues washed their hands of what happened on January 6 and have shown zero interest in holding President Trump accountable. Meanwhile, the president continues to falsely claim that rioters who violently assaulted police officers were, quote, hostages, that was his word, hostages, who were assaulted by our government, his words again. He's even considering financial compensation for the individuals involved in these heinous crimes. Republicans are trying to rewrite the history of January 6 as a tale of martyrdom and courage in an effort to whitewash what actually happened, what we saw with our own eyes. But make no mistake, January 6 was a stain on our democracy and an attempted coup on our government. We cannot allow the president and his supporters to dishonor the heroic sacrifices, and I use that word advisedly, heroic sacrifices of law enforcement officers who protected us and defended our democracy that day. To all the law enforcement officials in the room and those who are following this hearing, from the bottom of my heart, I extend my deepest thanks and appreciation for your service, for risking your life to protect mine and others. To add insult to injury, within hours of his inauguration earlier this year, President Trump granted clemency, full unconditional pardons to more than 1,500 who descended upon the Capitol on January 6. This decision led to the immediate release of these rioters who were convicted of violent assaults on police officers. Now Justice Department attorneys are arguing that President Trump's blanket pardon should apply to serious crimes committed by these same insurrectionists after January 6. And President Trump continues to elevate those who have whitewashed January 6 and defended the rioters. A classic example, Ed Martin, the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Martin helped lead the so-called Stop the Steal movement to overturn the 2020 election. He was on the ground at the U.S. Capitol on January 6 and claimed the insurrection was, and I quote, like Mardi Gras. Like Mardi Gras. Those are the words of the interim U.S. Attorney of the District of Columbia. Timothy Hale Cusinelli, a pardoned insurrectionist whose prosecutors identified as a, quote, white supremacist Nazi sympathizer, actually received an award from Martin, who described Cusinelli as a, quote, extraordinary man and extraordinary leader. I think there's a chart here with Cusinelli's image. You can draw your own conclusion of who he's trying to emulate. Or how about Kash Patel, now the FBI director, who infamously organized and recorded January 6 rioters singing the national anthem in the D.C. jail. One of Mr. Patel's choir boys was Julian Cater, assaulted a police officer named Brian Sicknick, who suffered multiple strokes and died after the attack. Many of the January 6 perpetrators have shown no remorse for the long-term mental and physical damage they inflicted on their victims and have engaged in a new crime spree since the insurrection. Take Edward Kelly. He was convicted in his home state of Tennessee last November of conspiracy to murder FBI officials who investigated the January 6 offenses. And just 2 short months ago, January 6 rioters held a press conference outside the Capitol to announce their intent to sue the Justice Department for prosecuting them. The group paraded around the Capitol, following the route they took on January 6 and chanting, "Whose house? Our house." After the press conference, former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio was even arrested outside the Capitol for assault. Tarrio also posted a video of himself stalking officers who defended the Capitol on January 6th, and calling them cowards. We're going to hear more about that today. This sounds like a man who thinks he's above the law and expects to be bailed out by President Trump for every crime he commits. Shortly after receiving Trump's pardons, dozens of former January 6 offenders joined forces on social media to compile and publicize the identities of at least 124 individuals involved in their convictions, including prosecutors, judges, and FBI agents. The post, which was received at least 60,000 views, includes names, photos, and disparaging remarks. The threat to these public servants is clear. Government employees should have no fear for their or their family's safety simply for doing their jobs. And we in Congress have an obligation to honor the sacrifice of the men and women who bravely defended the Capitol on January 6th. They deserve better than this. Today we welcome 4 witnesses. Our first is our friend Harry Dunn. Harry, it's great to see you again. 15-year veteran of the United States Capitol Police. He defended the Capitol during January 6th insurrection. Officer Dunn lobbied Congress to create the House Select Committee that investigated the attack and testified before it. He's been awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal, the Congressional Gold Medal, and the Capitol Police Service Medal for his efforts. Congratulations to you. We also welcome Mike Romano, former Deputy Chief of the Capitol Siege Section of the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. Mr. Romano, who served as federal prosecutor for almost 18 years, tried several January 6 cases to verdict, left the Justice Department after Attorney General Bondi slashed and shrank the public integrity section where he worked. He's now in private practice. Additionally, we're joined by Sarah Levine. Is it Levine or Levine? Levine. Sarah Levine, a former Assistant U.S. Attorney with the Capitol Siege Section of the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. Ms. Levine spent a year and a half handling January 6 cases while at the department. She was terminated by interim D.C. U.S. Attorney Ed Martin. Ms. Levine has spent a total of 8 years as a prosecutor at state and federal level, currently with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office in Virginia. Finally, we're joined by Officer Daniel Hodges of the Metropolitan Police Department, who defended this body during the January 6th insurrection and testified before the House Select Committee on the matter as well. He's been with the MPD for 11 years and been awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal and the Congressional Gold Medal for his efforts. Let me lay out the mechanics of the meeting. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide an opening statement, then rounds of questioning. Each senator will have 5 minutes to ask. Mr. Dunn, we're going to start with your opening statement and go in order across the table. Take it away, Harry.
Good afternoon, Ranking Member Durbin and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm thankful for this opportunity to appear before you with the chance to again continue to fight for the American people who believe that attacking police officers and storming the Capitol on a cold day in January is not the way to settle disputes about an election. At this moment, there's not much more that one could say about the events on January 6, 2021 that would come as a surprise to many people. All the facts have been laid out, the timelines have been established, the narratives have been written, and the bad players, well, most, have been held accountable. And just as fast, forgiven in the way of sentence commutations and pardons. It is truly unfortunate that January 6th has become such a partisan issue. On that day, I fought alongside officers who to this day are devoted supporters of the current president, while protecting people in this very building who either love, hate, or are indifferent to the current president. The inability for people, including members of this very body, to frankly call a spade is the ultimate betrayal and a slap in the face of law enforcement and to Americans. It is possible to still support the president and his policies while condemning him for what he encouraged and allowed to happen on that day. The Fraternal Order of Police, the FOP, was able to do so. They endorsed the current president in the past election, but they also condemned the pardons he gave indiscriminately to people who attacked and viciously beat police officers on January 6th. Elected officials in both the House and the Senate, not just here in Washington, but across the country, have shown they do not have the ability to do both. Many say that we need to get on with doing the work of the American people, and we need to move on from January 6th. I would love nothing more. I would love nothing more than to move on from talking about the worst day of my life. But as current officials attempt to rewrite what happened that day, and pardoned criminals are making runs for office and being celebrated by some. The officers, the true patriots of that day, who protected this very building, and many of the people sitting here before me, we have become nothing but afterthoughts. There's a plaque that was supposed to be hung in the Capitol, passed by the last Congress, that has still not seen the light of day. Sure, many have their own personal thoughts and beliefs about why what happened on January 6th happened, but under no circumstances can you debate what happened on that day. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to the elected officials. Don't listen to the political pundits on cable news. Turn the volume down and just press play. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thanks, Officer Dunn. Senator Schumer, our leader on the Democratic side, has been able to join us, and I want to turn the microphone over to him.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank, I don't know which one's on. There we go. I want to thank Senator Durbin and all of my members, all the Senate members for being here, and thank you, our great witnesses, and thank you, officer. So January 6th, of course, stays emblazoned in all of our minds. I had driven down, I had just learned at 4 in the morning that I was going to be majority leader because our 2 senators from Georgia won. Get in the car, finally get to the floor of the Senate at 1 p.m., and within an hour, my first time sitting as puted majority leader, I feel an arm yank my collar. It was a member of my detail, Officer Mike Lazinski, saying, "We're in danger, get out of here." And then I looked up at the podium and I saw our Vice President being evacuated. They rushed me out. We walked through a hallway and opened a door. And I was within 30 feet of these insurrectionist, I guess this is a proper hearing, sons of guns. One of them saw me. "There's the big Jew, let's get him." And because of the bravery of my police detail and Officer Lazinski, we ran the other way and escaped. Had one of them had a gun, had one of them blocked the door, Lord knows what would have happened. To allow these vicious people who have no respect for democracy, and with many of them no respect for other human lives, we've seen what's happened, to be pardoned, to be exonerated, is one of the very low points in American history, in all of American history. The only thing we can do, because Trump has this pardon power, which he uses to a vicious, nasty, and un-American end, is to bring to light what happened and remind people what happened. And remind who's in the White House, the caliber, the low caliber of the man in the White House who would do something like this. So your being here is extremely important, not only to recall what happened that day to all of you, but to remind America that this man doesn't deserve to be president. This man doesn't deserve to be president. So I want to thank you for coming. I don't want to take up too much time, but I felt I had to be here to make that point and to show how important this hearing is. And I salute Senator Durbin and the members of the Judiciary Committee for having it. America, we will not, there are certain things you can't forget. You must never let people forget. All the genocides that have occurred over the centuries, we can't let people forget that. I was at Armenian Remembrance Day and Holocaust Remembrance Day last Sunday. But this rises to that category. Never, never forget. Thanks,
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Mr. Romano.
Thank you, Ranking Member Durbin, Leader Schumer, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I worked at the Justice Department in various offices for almost 18 years. For the past 4 years, I was part of the team at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office that investigated and prosecuted crimes committed on January 6th, 2021. On January 6th, like many other Americans, I learned about the Capitol riot on the news as it was happening. I turned on my television and saw thousands of people storming the Capitol, apparently bent on forcing Congress to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. I was disgusted, and more importantly, I was afraid. I was afraid of what these rioters might do, and I was afraid they would never face consequences. I'm proud to have joined the effort to hold them accountable. Thanks to the work of our team, the Justice Department charged more than 1,500 people with crimes and obtained criminal convictions against almost 1,300 people. We ensured that the rioters would face accountability, no matter how short-lived. Our work created a public record of the crimes committed that day. It can be challenging to understand what happened during the riot. Americans reading my written statement or watching this hearing will not have the visceral, lived experience of an officer who defended the Capitol. They will not have the granular knowledge of the events of that day that FBI agents and prosecutors came to possess. With that in mind, I want to convey 3 lessons from my experience to my fellow Americans. First, the riot at the Capitol was a violent event. Hundreds of police officers were assaulted. Reviewing the evidence, I witnessed rioters attack officers with poles, metal pipes, bear spray, stun guns, chairs, bike rack barricades, broken pieces of furniture, and in one case, an explosive device. Officers were injured, some badly so. Senators, members of Congress, and staffers were forced to shelter in place, some fearing they would never make it home. Inside the Capitol, rioters called for the Vice President of the United States to be dragged out of the building and hanged. This was not a day of love, and it never has been. These rioters are not and never have been patriots. The riot was a violent assault on our democracy made up of numerous individual violent assaults of the people who stood in its defense. Second, the prosecution of misdemeanor defendants was critically important to our mission. It's easy to hear the word misdemeanor and think a crime is minor or even insignificant, but there were no small crimes on January 6th. The people charged with misdemeanors were basically accused of trespassing at the Capitol. They entered and remained knowing they should not have done so. Their presence enabled the mob violence. Without the volume of people who stormed the Capitol, less violence would have been committed, less damage would have been done. As one judge recognized, every raindrop contributes to a flood. And based on the evidence I've reviewed, many misdemeanor defendants understood exactly what the violent rioters meant to accomplish. They knowingly lent their bodies to the effort, even if they committed no violence themselves. Third, the rioters were treated fairly. They had skilled attorneys representing them. They challenged the evidence against them. Many took their cases to trial, testified, and made arguments to juries of their peers. In short, all of their constitutional rights were protected, and they were convicted in overwhelming numbers. Some have used our success to argue that the rioters were treated unfairly, that they were railroaded. The truth is, the rioters were convicted in such large numbers because the evidence against them was so powerful. On January 6th, the rioters were proud of their behavior. Many of them filmed their crimes using their own cell phones, texted their friends, and bragged about what they had done. Prosecutors dream of evidence this powerful. If these rioters think they were treated unfairly, it is because many of them thought, and apparently still think, they deserve to be seen as heroes. It's been a privilege to serve my country as a prosecutor, including by prosecuting these rioters. The riot was a mass crime of historic proportions, and it is incumbent on all of us not to forget what happened that day. It is a privilege to speak with you all today, Senators, and I look forward to answering the committee's questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romano. Ms. Levine?
Thank you, Ranking Member Durbin, for organizing this and the other members of the Senate Judiciary Committee for being here today. I have been a prosecutor for almost 8 years. I spent 1.5 years of that time working at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. in the Capitol Siege section, prosecuting the crimes that occurred on January 6th during that violent riot that took place at the Capitol building. Before I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I started my legal career as a county prosecutor in Pima County, Arizona. For those unfamiliar with the area, Tucson is the largest city within Pima County, and the county stretches to the Mexican border. It also includes multiple tribal jurisdictions, and while our office dealt with local crime, the office location always meant that we had to deal with other issues related to the drug trade and gangs, and immigration concerns were a daily part of life for defendants and victims alike. This is where I learned to be a prosecutor. One of the first things that office instilled in me was the highest respect for my ethical obligation as a prosecutor. Prosecutors have the ability to do something that no other attorney can. We can take away someone's freedom. This is a sacred responsibility, and with that responsibility comes a higher ethical obligation. That obligation includes following the facts, the law, and the Constitution. It means I can't go forward with a case based on feelings or opinions about those that are involved. In Pima County, I learned that being a prosecutor is about serving the whole community. I never once asked anyone about their political affiliation before helping them. Prosecution is nonpartisan. If a crime was committed, we pursued justice using the law and the evidence. We served the whole community and attempted to make it a safer place. This is where I worked on January 6, 2021. It was a disturbing event, but in Tucson, Arizona, it did not affect our everyday lives. So I, like many Americans, knew it was a terrible event, but I didn't think much about it. Then I moved to Washington, D.C., and I had the amazing opportunity to join the U.S. Attorney's Office. I accepted because I knew it was important work where I could serve my country in a unique and important way. When I started the job, I quickly learned that I knew nothing about what happened on January 6th. I had no idea about how violent it had been. I was surprised that Congress members and their staff were truly terrified that they would not survive. I was shocked as I watched footage of rioters violently attacking police officers with poles, riot shields, sticks, and crutches. Rioters telling officers that they support police and then attacking them. This was not just people forcing their way into the building. This was a siege of the Capitol. I was astonished to learn how close we came to losing democracy that day. And after seeing this mayhem and letting the gravity of it sink in, I got to work. The cases changed, but the work was the same. I followed the law and the evidence. I was guided by my ethics. If a crime was committed, I charged a case. I took cases to trial where the evidence supported it, and I declined cases where the evidence was lacking. I assessed criminal actions regardless of who committed them. I followed my oath to protect the Constitution. I have talked with many of the officers who were there that day. Most suffered some sort of injury, and all of them suffered some trauma from that experience. They are incredibly strong, brave individuals that did something very few would do. They are the true heroes of that day. The officers that testified talked about how they'd never seen a riot like January 6th. These were officers that had worked during the protests over the summer of 2020. They were officers that saw violent crime on a regular basis, but this was different. The rioters were dressed in gear like for war, combat helmets and body armor. They carried weapons like batons and flagpoles and stun guns. They were undeterred by the police. The officers who stood in the inauguration tunnel for hours, the same one that the president walks out of, talked about trying to stay on their feet. They didn't know if they were going to make it home that day. They stood in the doorway for hours to protect the members of Congress, staffers, and those others inside the building. Another officer who was in the initial breach near Peace Circle testified in court that the sound of his fellow police officer's head hitting the concrete stairs as she was knocked over by rioters lives in his head rent-free. His words still echo in my head often. That officer's attackers were among the pardoned. After the election, it became clear that the Capital C section would be dissolved when the new administration came to power. There's a lot of uncertainty about how quickly it would happen and what would happen to the more than 1,500 defendants who were already charged for acts committed during the riot. I knew some of them would be pardoned, but naively I thought that that would not include those who attacked police that day. Before the administration change, I agreed to join the Superior Court Division of the office. Superior Court prosecutes local crime in DC, and I thought I could serve the community. I wanted to continue to serve regardless of the administration. In January, I trained to join, and then on January 20th, 2025, the president pardoned almost all of the defendants charged on January 6th and commuted the sentence of every other rioter. I was heartbroken. All that effort to pursue justice for the officers and the country was wiped away with a single proclamation. This was an injustice to the community and to the victims of that day. However, it did not change what happened that day. There is a record of all that violence that happened that day through court records and videos that no pardon will ever clear. The next day, I returned to the office and learned that Ed Martin was the interim U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. I was not familiar with him, but I learned that he did not have a positive opinion, to say the least, of the January 6th prosecutions. In his first week, he did a meet and greet where he introduced himself, talked about his background, and he also talked about his goals. He discussed his desire to clean up D.C. so the world could visit the president for the 250th anniversary of the United States. He wanted to fight violent crime in D.C. And so I thought it was possible I could continue to serve that office. I was wrong. After 3 weeks of training and getting prepared for the next week, that Friday I left work. I walked to the metro station. I got on the train and I pulled out my phone and I saw a litigation hold that had been put on it. And attached to that was a memo that gave Mr. Martin permission to fire probationary employees from the Capitol Siege section that were moved to other places in the office. The memo referenced people but didn't have a list of names attached. But the information provided was confusing. I knew I was probably on the list, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. I headed back to the office so I could figure out what was happening. I was met by my colleagues who shared their confusion and a heartbreak over this sudden event. We left the office, and 2 hours later, the letters started rolling in, terminating us. At the end of the night, 15 assistant U.S. attorneys had been fired. The termination letter I received stated the decision was based on your actions in the prosecution of persons relating to the events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. An executive order issued on January 20th, 2025, the president characterized that work as having involved a grave national injustice that has perpetrated upon the American people over the last 4 years. It went on to say that my hiring has hindered the ability of the acting U.S. Attorney Martin to staff his office in furtherance of his obligation to faithfully implement the agenda that the American people elected President Trump to execute. The termination letter made it clear to me that Mr. Martin does not understand the role of a prosecutor. U.S. attorneys represent the United States of America, not the president. Firing 15 qualified attorneys created an immediate deficit in the office to appropriately prosecute cases. Mr. Martin's stated mission when he started the U.S. Attorney's Office was to clean up Washington, D.C. and focus on violent crime. I am the exact type of person who a United States attorney should hire for that goal. Mr. Martin's actions are those of a political operative. He fails to grasp what it means to be a prosecutor. For Mr. Martin, it appears that prosecution is not about service to the community or this nation. He seems to lack an understanding of the sacred responsibility of being able to take away someone's freedom. He does not concentrate on his responsibility to victims of crime. His focus appears to be solely on serving the president instead of the people of Washington, D.C. and this country. He talks about cracking down on assaults against police officers, but he oversaw the dismissal of many assaults on law enforcement officers that happened on January 6th. Prosecution is not political, but Mr. Martin treats it as political. Prosecution is about following the law, the Constitution, and the evidence, and I worry that Mr. Martin will ignore these safeguards. The riot that happened on January 6th, it was violent and destructive. It was not a few bad actors that did a few bad things. It was massive and terrifying. It affected police officers protecting the building and the people who worked inside the Capitol. It was not peaceful. Nothing can change what happened that day. And I thank you for helping us to protect that record from those who want to whitewash an insurrection.
Thank you, Ms. Levine. Officer Hodges.
Good afternoon. I'm here in my personal capacity and not on behalf of my employer, but this is not where I wanted to be today. After the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, after being beaten with blunt instruments, punched, kicked, having someone attempt to gouge out my eye after being robbed, crushed, and bloodied, I was hopeful. I really thought that this has to be it. This has to be where the Republican Party finally takes the off-ramp from Donald Trump and his ilk. There's no way to cover this up. There's too much evidence. There's no way to make this look good. It was a violent insurrection, an attempt to stop the peaceful transfer of power and thwart the will of the people. But my hope was far too optimistic. After it became apparent they would fail in their mission, Donald Trump finally stopped watching the brutality on TV and told them, "We love you. You're very special." The invertebrates in Congress, who not so long ago were cowering in their seats while my colleagues and I took the blows meant for them, started beating their chests, making excuses, crafting conspiracies, and outright lying about the events of the day. And years later, despite all the evidence of wrongdoing, despite the testimonies from Republicans in the Trump administration, despite trial after trial where insurrectionists were proven guilty of crimes beyond a reasonable doubt, it hasn't stopped. Quite the opposite. Now that Donald Trump, for reasons I cannot fathom, has secured a second term in office, revisionist historians have only gained more avenues with which to poison the well of truth. Despite a plaque honoring the sacrifice of my colleagues being created by Congress, that Pharisaic homunculus Mike Johnson refuses to install it as required by law. Ed Martin, the Nazi-supporting interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, has dismissed or reassigned dozens of prosecutors who worked on January 6 cases. He also had the temerity to post, "Hit a cop, you'll pay for it," on his social media after legally representing January 6 defendants and fundraising for Proud Boys. Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, the list goes on. And of course, there is everything Trump has done and is doing to indemnify, empower, and encourage his private militia to commit further acts of violence. On Inauguration Day this year, I worked approximately 14 hours to ensure the safety and security of all in attendance. At one point, I secured his travel route. He passed within feet of me as I kept others back from the street. When I got home, I learned that one of his first acts of his second term was to pardon or grant clemency to almost 1,600 convicts from the attack. Most recently, Trump has floated the idea of a fund for compensating insurrectionists. This bears repeating. Donald Trump effectively wants to pay people to assault, maim, and contribute to the deaths of police officers. He wants to pay them to show up to Washington at his command and fight to intimidate government officials into not serving as a check against the executive. And he wants them to know there will be no legal repercussions for them doing so. He's communicating this quite clearly to his thralls while he publicly flouts the 22nd Amendment, indicating that he's going to spit on the Constitution one last time in 2028 before, as he has called for in the past, terminating it completely. I could make this all about me. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I could talk about how I've been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, anxiety adjustment disorder, and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. I could talk about the threats I've received, people pasting pictures of my head on top of nooses, people telling me to kill myself, people sending me clips of snuff films, people trying to find out if I have a wife or kids to harass, people trying to get me fired for speaking out. I could talk about how law firms were afraid to go after those who defame me, saying they'd be targeted by the Trump administration for lawfare. But I've always been a big picture person, and at the end of the day, I'm just one man. It's the country that's in unprecedented danger. When last I testified on the Hill, it was in an effort to produce accountability for those in power. And despite the efforts of good people throughout this country, we failed. I'm here today with perhaps more modest goals. To fight the lies and preserve the truth. To warn whatever Americans are left that fascism is here and it's putting down roots. It's up to us to exercise our power every day to ensure that we are clear-sighted about the past, actively engaged in the present, and cognizant of the dangers of the near future before the power we have to shape our own destiny is stamped out forever. Thank you.
Officer Hodges, Officer Dunn, we can't remove the scars of your experience, but I want you to know we genuinely appreciate your heroism and courage for standing up to defend us, members of Congress, our family, friends, and staff who were in that building. You didn't ask for that, but you responded to your duty, you did it well, and you deserve to be proud of that. You received the presidential medals, recognition of your contribution, and despite the scars that you still wear, I want you to know from my heart, I think I speak for all of us, we appreciate what you were willing to sacrifice. Ms. Levine and Mr. Romano, Ed Martin's nomination to be U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia is pending before this committee. I want to kind of understand a little more how you happened to be assigned to these cases initially, how you executed them, if there was anything unusual in your duties and that responsibility, and Ed Martin's personal involvement, if there was any, in your being terminated from the office. Ms. Levine, I believe you served for 8 years in that office after the Arizona experience.
I was there for a year and a half, actually. I specifically came to work on January 6th cases. That's why I came to the office, was for a position in the Capitol Siege section.
And how many cases were you assigned?
I worked on about 40 cases while I was there.
40 cases. Mr. Romano?
I joined the Capitol Siege section in February of 2021. I knew from talking to some of my former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office that there was going to be a call that went out to other parts of the Justice Department for people to staff this effort, because there was a sense that there needed to be many more people assigned to prosecute these cases nationwide, many more people assigned to investigate these cases nationwide than the U.S. Attorney's Office had available. So I was working elsewhere at the time, but I was one of the first people that joined in February of 2021 when they reached out beyond the office for help.
How many cases were you assigned?
About 20 or so before I became a manager, and since becoming a deputy chief, I've worked on hundreds.
Could you tell me, in terms of the individuals that you prosecuted, whether many of them had criminal records?
Some of them did, yes. For some of them, this was their first offense, but there certainly were people with criminal records.
I can't tell you how many cases I've been advised have been filed against these individuals after the pardon for their activities, some before, many times afterwards. In fact, in Central Illinois, there's a case now, a murder case, involving one of these defendants as well. So clearly some of them had criminal records coming into this experience.
That's right, some of them did.
I want to give my colleagues a chance to ask questions. I have a group here. Senator Klobuchar is first on the list. Senator Coons, Senator Blumenthal, I think, left.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I know you well, Officer Dunn, and I think we've discussed, we were both there at 3 in the morning, and what that was like. Senator Blunt and I were the last ones here with Vice President Pence from the Senate, making that walk over the broken glass that in the morning had been this celebration to get those mahogany boxes filled with the electoral ballots for the country to the House, so that the election was finally certified. And I thank all of you for what you did that day and then since that time. My first question would be of you, Ms. Levine, as a former prosecutor, to kind of relate to that whole thing. Your termination letter stated that you were fired based upon your actions in the prosecution of persons relating to events that occurred on January 6th. As you discussed, Mr. Martin fired a number of these career prosecutors who perhaps just happened to be assigned to this case. I know that there were people in my state that happened to be the ones that delivered subpoenas and the like, who were then on a list. I asked Ed Martin in written questions how firing career prosecutors would impact public safety, and he refused to answer. So I will ask you, does firing career prosecutors just because they worked on the January 6th case weaken public safety and send the wrong message to law enforcement? If you could elaborate on the effect based on your experience it has on public safety.
Absolutely. It's always important to have people that actually truly understand how to prosecute cases doing that kind of work. And as someone who has 8 years of experience prosecuting cases, having someone with that kind of experience helps them to do that kind of work. Firing people for just doing their job and prosecuting cases for political reasons, I would imagine makes it much more difficult to hire the kind of people that have the appropriate kind of experience to do that. And as the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., part of their job is to prosecute local crime. Having people that understand how to prosecute local crime and do so ethically is important regardless of their political party. And it is a hindrance when you fire people just because they worked on a particular case.
Thanks. And then Officers Dunn and Hodges, do you agree with President Trump that January 6th was, in his words, a day of love? And Ed Martin, who tweeted, "Rowdy crowd, but nothing out of hand," nearly an hour after the Capitol was breached. And later in the afternoon, Ed Martin tweeted, "Like Mardi Gras in D.C. today, love, faith, and joy."
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that that's not my experience of the day. Like I said before, I was brutally attacked at multiple points throughout the day. I had my equipment stolen from me. I had to watch my colleagues get attacked, and I couldn't do anything about it because I was busy fending off my own attackers. I had colleagues who had to get fingertips amputated, who were covered head to toe in bear spray, who shocked by cattle prods. There's just every sort of assault you can think of.
A day of love for who? Donald Trump supporters, and even them. Like it's hard for me to muster sympathy for them. But they were there because they believed the lie. Their lives were ruined because of choices they made. I'm not excusing them or making zero sympathy, zero. But a day of love for who? Donald Trump believes in nobody but himself. He fights for nobody but himself, but he wants everybody to fight for him, which is why someone like Ed Martin makes sense to him, because he will do any and everything to please Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to do nothing more than to rewrite what happened on January 6th, erase what happened, whitewash it, downplay it. It was a day of love, and Ed Martin will do nothing but echo that. So a day of love for who?
Thank you. I'm going to let my colleagues, I'm sure they'll ask you something, Mr. Romano, and thank you, all of you.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Coons?
Thank you, Senator Durbin, and thank you to each of our witnesses for what you've done to stand up for our nation, for our Congress, for our democracy, for the rule of law. Officer Hodges, Officer Dunn, thank you for literally putting your lives on the line that day as each of us were playing our role in confirming the results of the election. This wasn't just, Mr. Romano, as you put it, a mass crime of historic proportions. It wasn't just assaults on hundreds of police officers. That would be enough. But it was also all in furtherance of an attempt to overturn an election. The idea that President Trump's first day, he acted to pardon not a few who perhaps had minor misdemeanor, but every one of those who committed criminal acts on January 6th, including those who assaulted police officers, is to me unspeakable. The FOP, which has previously endorsed President Trump, spoke out against the indiscriminate pardons. This should be, Senator Durbin, a bipartisan hearing. I am the founder and co-chair of the Bipartisan Law Enforcement Caucus in the Senate. My Republican colleagues should be here with us, hearing from you the impact on you as law enforcement officers, as prosecutors, of these indiscriminate and baseless pardons. On Monday, President Trump issued an executive order entitled "Strengthening and Unleashing America's Law Enforcement to Pursue Criminals and Protect Innocent Citizens." That is bitterly ironic to me coming from him. We are here today exactly because Trump and Ed Martin prioritized criminals over law enforcement, pardoning more than 1,500 violent insurrectionists, hundreds of whom directly attacked law enforcement officers on January 6th. Howie Liebengood, a 15-year veteran of the Capitol Police, was a personal friend. He is someone who many of us in the Senate came to know for his kindness, his decency, his professionalism, and his widow, Dr. Serena Liebengood, I count as a friend. The idea that elected members of Congress can look you in the eyes and say anything other than thank you for your service, 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 is unacceptable to me. I would be interested, if you could, Officer Dunn, just tell me, this executive order by Trump says he will empower state and local law enforcement to firmly police dangerous criminal behavior. Did his pardons of the rioters who attacked you and hurled racial slurs at you as a police officer while attacking you make you feel empowered to fight violent crime?
Well, thank you for your remarks, Senator. As Ranking Member said, there's a case going on right now in Illinois. A lot of these people who were criminals on January 6th were criminals before, and they're criminals again afterwards. But Donald Trump stands by them. Empowering people? No. Who do you want to empower? Law enforcement? Do you want to empower communities? You want people to be safe. You want communities to be safe. Donald Trump believes in the rule of law when it benefits him, and that's it. And it's really unfortunate. You know, you mentioned the Republican members should be here right now, and it sucks, to be frank, that January 6th became a partisan issue.
Should not be.
It should not be a partisan issue. I simply say, I've said this many times, just press play, and you tell me that that's okay. It's really unfortunate that, yeah, people have their narratives about what happened that day, but you cannot deny the facts of what happened that day. And anybody unwilling to condemn what happened that day, to me, frankly, should not be fit to serve for any office. But to go back to the heart of your question, no, Donald Trump, what criminals is he talking about? Because he absolutely supports the people who will commit crimes in his name. And that's where we are right now. That doesn't empower communities.
Vice President Mike Pence was clear then, is clear now, about who committed what crimes on that day. Officer Hodges, if I might, Trump's executive order says he will not tolerate violations of law that get in the way of tenacious law enforcement officers protecting their communities. I think I know the answer, but could you just share with us how Trump's pardons of the rioters who attacked you physically has made you feel about whether this administration has the back of law enforcement officers?
It's incredible that people still believe that the GOP is the party of law and order. That's not the case. That's certainly not the case for Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't care about police officers. What he cares about is his own power and anyone who helps secure his power, which is why he panders to the cops all the time, because he needs them for his own fascism designs. It's why he's testing the waters with this martial law light executive order that he just passed. Yep. I'd served in the Virginia National Guard for 6 years. The military is not trained, equipped. They don't have the education to support law enforcement in a serious capacity. Whenever we have something like that in DC, and the National Guard helps, they just assign traffic posts essentially, or if things really get out of control, riot control. But there's no meaningful way they can conduct criminal investigations. They're simply not trained for that. With regard to, I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
We're simply agreeing that President Trump's executive order does not suggest that he actually has the back of law enforcement.
Right, yeah.
His pardons speak.
He pardoned an enormous number of people who assaulted law enforcement, contributed to the deaths of police officers. He wants to have his private militia know that he has their back, and he wants to reserve their help in the future. This does not make me feel like he has my back. Quite the contrary, and there are now people out there who have sworn vengeance who might come back to DC and try to enact that vengeance against me. And then with interim attorney Ed Martin, if I used defensive tactics, he could take that case, say that the insurrectionists who attacked me committed no crime, but I committed a crime in defending myself. So that's what I've got to worry about.
This is a world where up is down, down is up. If I might, one last question, or should I move on? Just briefly, Ms. Levine, Mr. Romano, thank you. You both held senior offices in the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is one of the most important U.S. Attorney's offices in the country, and you were purged from the office for your service, your nonpartisan professional service as prosecutors. What message does the retaliation you faced send to other attorneys at the Department of Justice or in the U.S. Attorney's Office?
The termination sends the message that if you work on cases that the administration does not agree with, that you are putting your professional career on the line. I would be very concerned to still be working in that office and have the ethical issues that probably come up from having to make that decision. So it's a danger for law and order. It's a danger for what the Department of Justice does.
Thank you.
Before I ever worked on any of the January 6th cases, Senator, I worked on street crime cases where it was essential on a day-to-day basis for me to be able to go into my supervisor's office and have a candid conversation with him about a case, the evidence we had, whether we should go forward or not, whether or not we had the right person charged with the right crime. We can't do our jobs properly without being able to have those candid conversations and without being able to have healthy, respectful disagreements. The work that Interim U.S. Attorney Martin has done to demote people, to fire people, creates an environment where those conversations can't happen. The office is going to be less effective. The city is going to be less safe because people would fear to do the basic work that is required to do our jobs.
All four of you stood up for the rule of law and stood up for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coons. Senator Rono?
Thank you very much for having this hearing. And I want to thank each of you for being here. All of us were here, I believe, on January 6th. And I remember where we were taken, senators and I believe House members were taken to a safe place. And I did not know what was going on in the Capitol until some TV monitors were finally brought in. And when I saw the rioting and the violence that was taking place, there was no doubt in my mind that if these out-of-control rioters, these violent rioters, a mob had gotten hold of any of us, that they would have hurt us. They might have even killed us. There was no doubt in my mind. So I want to thank Officer Hodges and Officer Dunn for all that you did, putting yourself in the line of fire and protecting us. And we have a president who thinks that the rule of law doesn't apply to him, aided and abetted by the Supreme Court's immunity decision. And so one of the first things he does is to grant a pardon to over 1,500 rioters who went through the process of having lawyers, and they defended themselves or not, as many of them just pled guilty. This was a violent group of people. So I hardly know what to say that if we try to just sweep all this under the rug, I think we should, every January 6th, we should call forth to the American people what happened at the Capitol, and that there were all these people who were violently protesting. They beat police officers, and we should never forget. There are things that happens in the history of our country that we should never forget. And now one of these people, Ed Martin, I'm glad his name has been brought up, because you all have experience with him, especially our two prosecutors. And when we talk about the times in our history that we should never forget, of course, the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II is a very dark and sad time in our country's history, and yet Ed Martin has likened the prosecution of the mob on January 6th to what happened to Japanese Americans, and he had the gall to say that what happened to the insurrectionists was the greatest failure of legal judgment since the Japanese internment. So that's Ed Martin. I have two questions for you. The first question is, do any of you think that Ed Martin should be confirmed as U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. by the U.S. Senate?
No, ma'am. Anybody that still believes the election was stolen is not fit to serve in any capacity in any public office.
Senator, I wouldn't hire Ed Martin for an entry-level position in that office, much less put him in charge of it.
Ed Martin does not have the prosecutorial ethics to be able to be in charge of an office. He doesn't understand the basics of what it means to be a prosecutor and shouldn't be in charge of anyone.
No.
Well, you know that the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee have called for a hearing. We normally do not have hearings, individual hearings on U.S. attorneys, but this is, in my view, Ed Martin is such an egregious example of someone who should not hold that office because he will use that office to misuse and abuse the law. The second question I have for you. The president's power of pardon is pretty unfettered. Do you think that we should put limits on the president's powers of pardon? Should we create some guardrails? Should there be some parameters? Perhaps our two prosecutors, but if either one of the officers want to weigh in, please.
Yeah, I'm all for guardrails. I mean, sure, the pardon power is extremely broad and absolute. I don't think powers like that should exist in the United States, no matter who the president is. But under Donald Trump, it's extremely dangerous and scary. Myself, Daniel Hodges, Senator Schiff, imagine that. We would have pardons, preemptive pardons, to protect us from what Donald Trump may do just because we testified. I'm all for guardrails, especially with the individual, with the stability of Donald Trump in the White House.
I would support that as well. I'm not sure exactly what the guardrails would look like. Over the past 100 or so days, I've certainly thought that there need to be more guardrails on the president's authority in a number of ways, but certainly the pardons among them. The idea that somebody would empower 1,500 or so supporters who participated in a violent event through pardons would encourage them to know that they can go out and commit this sort of violence again. They could participate in an event like this again and face no consequences is appalling, and it shouldn't be something we accept.
Ms. Levine?
I agree with Mr. Romano. I think that there should be some sort of guardrails that are put in place. The fact that there have been 1,500 people that were part of a violent riot that were pardoned speaks to the need to have some sort of guardrails in place.
Officer Hodges?
On its face, it's interesting that the power of presidential pardons even exists. The idea that one man or woman can just completely overturn the convictions of a court where someone has been found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So, yeah, at a minimum, there should be some sort of restrictions, and possibly even examine the existence of the pardon at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Schiff?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. And thank you for all your leadership of our committee and your relentless pursuit of the rule of law and justice. We are all in your debt. Thank you to the witnesses who are here today for your courage. This is exactly what you need and that we need. And I hope your example will be inspiring to others. I want to just start with a recap of January 6th and everything we have seen since. Just a quick recap for people who are trying to reinvent history, because I was there, as my colleagues were, on January 6th, when hundreds, indeed thousands of people surrounded the Capitol, broke into that building, assaulted police officers, crushed you, Daniel, in that revolving door, desecrated this building. We're hunting for Leader Schumer. We're hunting for Leader Pelosi. I remember the fear of that day. I remember being told to get down on the ground to grab our gas masks. I remember being told that we had to get out. And I remember what happened in the aftermath of that. I remember when the Republican leader in the House said that Donald Trump bore responsibility and ought to be censured for his role in that insurrection. I remember when the Republican leader in the Senate said that Trump was practically and morally responsible for that attack, and it was a disgraceful dereliction of duty. Those were the words of Republicans when the events of that day were fresh in their mind, because like everyone else, they'd had to go running out of this building. Thankfully, safe because of your work, Officer Hodges, your work, Harry Dunn. That's where we were in the immediate aftermath. I remember over the next 2 years that followed, serving on the January 6th committee, bringing in witness after witness to testify about the violent attack that day, to testify about the president's role in it, to testify about the big lie, the efforts around the country to try to overturn a free and fair election. I remember hearing the testimony of brave witnesses like Cassidy Hutchinson, who were within the administration, other brave witnesses like Secretary Raffensperger in Georgia, who refused to lie about an election, put their responsibility to their constituents and the Constitution above that of their party. And I remember the work that the Justice Department did to bring those who made that attack possible to justice. The hundreds of prosecutions that were brought, Mr. Romano and Ms. Levine, by courageous prosecutors like yourselves. And as you pointed out, Mr. Romano, cases where the evidence was overwhelming, where many pleaded guilty, others were convicted by a unanimous jury beyond a reasonable doubt. I remember all of that. I also remember what happened the moment that Donald Trump was sworn into office again, the man who incited that attack. Because the moment he was sworn in, we saw the next chapter of January 6th. We saw the big lie turn into big vengeance. We saw the president pardon thousands, hundreds of violent attackers on police, a total of 1,600 people overnight. We saw the firing of prosecutors who had brought many of those cases. We saw the effort to purge the FBI of agents who were assigned to those cases. We saw the punishing of law firms who represented the special counsel or played other roles in the investigation or prosecution of January 6th. We saw the appointment of the president's criminal defense lawyers to the highest ranks of the Justice Department, and we saw a acting U.S. attorney, Ed Martin, appointed here in the District of Columbia to one of the most important U.S. attorney's offices in the country, with no experience except for being a stop-the-steal lawyer, except for somebody who said there ought to be, quote, less judgment for somebody who hits a cop. How is it possible that we're even considering someone for U.S. attorney who says there should be less judgment for someone who hits a cop? I guess what he's really saying is less judgment for somebody who hits a cop who is acting in the service of the president. I think that's really where he's coming from. This is someone who goes beyond what the Justice Department apparently is now represented in court, that they want to pay back the January 6th criminals who had to pay restitution. He wants them paid back. The department wants them paid back. Ed Martin wants reparations, as if somehow the government has some debt to these people who attacked the Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. So that's just a quick nutshell of the 6th and what has followed since. And Mr. Romano, I know you've been in the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department for 15 years. We are grateful for your service. I don't even know where to begin to ask you about the nightmare we're in, except what do you make of a Justice Department now that intervenes in a criminal case in New York involving allegations of serious corruption by a mayor to make that case go away because the mayor is useful to the president on an unrelated policy matter? What do you make of the Justice Department firing a prosecutor who won't falsely assert there's a criminal basis for investigation of an environmental fund because it's unethical to do. What do you make of that Justice Department? Do you even recognize it?
It's hard to know what to say about that, Senator. Those choices were terrible. I fear that they're a signal of more to come. There never should have been that effort to dismiss the case in New York. That was an effort to have the mayor of New York help the president with the enforcement of immigration. That has nothing to do with whether there was a case that was appropriately investigated and prosecuted. The prosecution of public corruption offenses is tremendously important. People who are in positions of power and abuse that power should be held accountable. And I worked in the public integrity section. I was there at the time that my deputy chiefs refused to sign off on that. I was proud of them for doing so. They conveyed to us that they had let Justice Department management know that they were not going to sign that motion to dismiss the case against Mayor Adams. It was awful to see them fired, but we were proud of the action that they took. That is what attorneys in the Justice Department should be doing. I am deeply afraid that the Justice Department is going to be used against the president's enemies and that these are signs of things to come.
Thank you, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Chairman.
The next three members will be Senator Blumenthal, Senator Booker, Senator Cortez Masto, and then I think Senator Welch may be on his way. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I think what you have done is really ignited a powerful feeling across the country about the threat of violent extremism and the need to stand up against it. And that's why we're here. I'm a little bit ashamed that we're here in this setting because it should be a hearing with all of us up on that dais, a hearing of the committee, joined by Republicans as well as Democrats. This issue should not be a political one. It's about law enforcement. When I was United States Attorney for Connecticut and I walked through the Department of Justice, I was filled with a unique feeling of pride and purpose. Others of us who have been in that position feel it as well, that our mission, as Justice Jackson once said, was not to win cases, but to do justice. Every one of you deserves the Profile and Courage Award that Officer Dunn and Officer Hodges received, every one of you as law enforcers. So I'm here to say thank you for your courage, your grace under pressure, which is what prosecutors and police do to protect not just individuals, but our democracy. I had to be absent because I spoke on the floor of the Senate about the SAVE Act, a threat to voting rights. So much of what we are seeing now is a threat to those principles and ideals that you have devoted your lives to uphold. And we owe you more than ever our thanks for the work that you're doing in a very personal way. But that threat to our democracy from violent extremism, you know, if you look at the intelligence community reports that we see, the biggest threat to our internal security isn't the shoe bomber from Africa, it is the violent extremist in this country who followed two of you in the lobby of a hotel harassing you, even after all of it went down. To pardon those people defiles the Department of Justice and the concept of justice that our nation epitomizes. So the question for me really is, and I don't know the answer, can we restore that sense of respect, even reverence for the rule of law. And I would invite you to comment on that question. You've probably thought about it. You may not want to comment. I'm posing it to you because I would really like your guidance, your advice. Has the damage been irreparable? Can we restore that respect and reverence for the rule of law that animates the American democracy? I am ever hopeful. I feel we can. As we approach Memorial Day, I'm hoping that we can renew that sense of purpose, and I would invite all of you to comment.
Senator, thank you for your remarks. A couple weeks ago, I was up in your home state.
In Trumbull.
And it was a great opportunity. And what was I doing up there? Attempting to restore that hope that this country is worth fighting for. If we lose our hope, then what's the point? What's the point after that when it's all gone? Let's just roll over and just roll with the punches. I don't want to gaslight anybody and say that we are going to restore it and we're going to be okay. I don't know. But I do know that without us four and a whole army of people that are democracy defenders and fighters, I do know that without us standing up, it won't happen. So to answer your question, I'm hopeful that it can be. I don't know if it will be, but I do know that without us doing nothing, it won't happen. So.
Senator, I'm hopeful as well. I don't know if I'm being too optimistic or not, but I think what it takes, big picture, is for people to care more about the rule of law, to care more about the values we share than the outcome of a specific election. And that can be a large ask because people care deeply about winning. But ultimately, parties win elections sometimes, parties lose elections sometimes, people come in and out of positions of power. But the rule of law is the ideal that should bind us all together. My experience as a prosecutor has been that when people are called to jury duty, even though they'd rather not be there, they take the duty seriously and they feel better about our justice system and feel better about justice being done in their community for engaging. So I think that having people understand the threat that the rule of law is under and understand how the system actually works, understand the cases against the rioters, for instance, and how they were treated fairly, that's important to making sure people have faith in the rule of law.
Well said, both of you. Thank you. Ms. Lamine?
I am hopeful that it is something that can be restored. I think that I think the people that want to be prosecutors are still people that all want to take that oath to swear to uphold the Constitution and the law, and that they care about that. And that the normal people within the United States, they also care about that. And I think it's something where all we have is at least some hope, because the rule of law is a bedrock of our democracy, and we need it to be able to continue to have this be the great country that it is.
If I didn't think it was possible to restore the country to its former glory, I wouldn't be here today. Society is a living thing. Civilization is dynamic. It's not something that gets set in its ways and is immutable. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. This too shall pass. You know, it might be another 3.5 years, it might be 100 years, but we can fix this. It's just a matter of getting enough people to believe in it and take action on it that will change, whether it's something that happens in the short term or long term.
Well, I want to thank you again. I just want to say finally, I think the pardon power has to be restricted in some way. I'm going to be proposing some kind of measure. I think it probably has to be a constitutional amendment. Not to take away the pardon power, not to eliminate pardons, but to impose some kind of restrictions, because it is one of the only powers where there are no checks and balances, and there are no guardrails against overthrowing a valid verdict from a jury of citizens who do follow the law. By and large, they follow the law. They want to follow the law. They want to do justice. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Blumenthal. Senators Booker, Cortez Masto, and Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I am very emotionally moved by your testimony. It adds to a deeper ache and agony I feel over what has happened since that day. And I will never forget, by the time I got back to my office and turned on the TV, and the first thing that struck me were symbols of hate. This is a president who talks about anti-Semitism and uses that as the, weaponizes that, in my opinion, to go after a lot of institutions, scientific research, and more. But there were so many symbols and signs of anti-Semitism there, including I saw Camp Auschwitz T-shirts celebrating the horror of the killing of 6 million Jews. I saw the Confederate flag there waving triumphantly. I know that those insurrectionists tried to take our capital but failed, but now to see that flag waving, this deep hatred, anti-Semitism, and bigotry, and I know, Officer Dunn, we've talked about the hurling of racial epithets on African-American officers during that day. And so this was an insurrection. This was a vicious, violent beating of police officers. This was an attempt to demean and degrade those police officers with the most vile bigotry. And yet we have a president that is celebrating them. We have a FBI director now that called them political prisoners and celebrated, as you so artfully discussed during his confirmation hearing, celebrated those folks with his choir. I wrestle with this a lot, and I'm grateful to hear you all express a sentiment of, in a sense, being prisoners of hope about our democracy and the resiliency of it. We've seen wretched, horrific chapters before of hate, bigotry, and violence. But this one has living wounds that people are still experiencing and enduring. One of those people that have those wounds is Brian Sicknick's family. This great New Jersey family had to watch Julian Cater, who assaulted Brian Sicknick, sprayed him in the face with pepper spray from less than 8 feet away. This incredible man, Brian Sicknick, who served to protect all of us, served in the New Jersey Air National Guard before joining the Capitol Police. And then he died the day after. I ache right now to see what's happening to our democracy. Assaults on due process, assaults on fundamental rights to free speech, assaults on the Justice Department. And in many ways, this first action that he took in the moments after he was sworn into office, Donald Trump decimated in many ways the honor and respect, or attempted to denigrate and demean the victims on that day, who were disproportionately police officers who tried desperately to protect Congresspeople, their staffs, family, and friends. I want to ask really 2 points, and I'll put them both out there. One is that this license that has been given to people who have been released back into our community, some of whom are now committing crimes, but one of the real threats to a democracy is a license given to political violence. And I would like for you to comment on that. Do you feel that in many ways what Donald Trump has done is not just the horrific injury of pardoning people that savagely beat police officers, beatings and attacks that I believe unequivocally that led to deaths, but this idea that in our nation we must commit in this democracy to nonviolence? Do you believe that his actions in some way have encouraged political violence within our country? And then second, this idea of inflaming racial tension and anti-Semitism, do you believe that his actions did not help to heal those rifts, but actually contributed to them? And I'll ask you both questions, and then, Mr. Chairman, you can move to the next senator.
Thank you, Senator Booker. First of all, I'm all for criminal justice reform, and once somebody has paid their debt to society, they can be rehabilitated and enter society and be contributing members of that. The point of accountability is, I see it as two different things, and my prosecutors may have another, but it brings some type of closure, some type of resolution to the victims when accountability is served. And it also serves as a deterrent to keep it from doing again, people from doing again, not just them, but society as a whole. The fact that accountability was given to the accountability was waived, and the individuals who attacked police officers, violently beat, desecrated the Capitol, attempted insurrection, the president forgave them. It kind of wipes out any accountability, and it sends the message, hey, you know what? The president forgave us, and not only forgave us, applauded us for standing up and standing with him. It's okay to do this. So the pardon that Donald Trump gave to these individuals, I mean, not many rejected him, right? I don't even know if you can reject pardons or not, but they embraced it with open arms. They felt that they were right. So I don't think it did anything but encourage what happened on January 6th, as long as you're doing it in the name of Donald Trump.
Thank you, Senator. I want to say first, when you spoke about Officer Sicknick, I vividly remember being at Julian Cater's sentencing and hearing statements to the court by Officer Sicknick's family. They were tremendously moving, and my heart goes out to his family for everything that they've been through in their loss. On the subject of the message that the pardons send, one of the things that I was proudest of in my work in the Capitol Siege section, and that I remember discussing with other prosecutors there, was that in the 4 years since January 6th, we had no other event like January 6th. The passions that inflamed people to riot at the Capitol obviously still existed. Division still existed in our country. Disagreements still existed. But there was nothing else that happened like this. And I think that was in part because of our efforts, because of the prosecution. I think that people were deterred, that people saw that there would be accountability. To have the pardons send the message that they do, in my view, absolutely encourages future political violence. That's deeply troubling. And I apologize, I forgot your second question, Senator.
We are very committed to fight against anti-Semitism, to fight against racial hatred, to heal those divisions in our country. And we have a president that gives lip service to those things. Mm-hmm. But these actions, do they encourage that kind of hatred?
I think they do. I saw from the evidence that we reviewed in the cases that we worked on that some of the rioters were motivated by anti-Semitism. They were motivated by racial hatred. One in particular that I'm aware of who has come up in recent days is Timothy Hill Cusinelli, who made anti-Semitic statements before and after the riots, seemed to be motivated by them. And he's someone who interim U.S. Attorney Ed Martin has publicly praised. And there has been reporting about him trying to apparently walk back statements praising Timothy Hill Cusinelli, but from everything I understand, he was aware of the things that Timothy Hill Cusinelli had said, the things that were in court documents, the things that the court found about Mr. Hill Cusinelli.
The naked anti-Semitism of that individual, he was aware of those things.
Well, I think that's what public reporting has indicated.
So I do think that these pardons send a very terrible message. That you can look at what has happened in this country, and the fascism has been something that has been under the surface for a long time and has been building. And the kind of hate that goes along with that has been building for a long time. I think a lot of people didn't necessarily realize it was happening, almost like we were the frog in the pot that was slowly getting boiled. And I think what happens is this has come to a point now that what is happening is we're seeing what is actually here. And what has been said and what has been done with those pardons is given people permission to continue with that animus and that hate and to go after people for reasons that are completely and wholly inappropriate. And it creates a very scary world.
Do I believe Trump and his actions have encouraged political violence? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't be here if he hadn't, right? The whole January 6th thing, that was his show. Courts have found that he engaged in insurrection, and even when it went to the Supreme Court wouldn't even say he didn't. They just said that states aren't allowed to decide if he's not allowed under the 14th Amendment. And the pardons, absolutely. I mean, he's saying that, you know, whenever I need you, just come on out and fight for me. You won't face any legal repercussions. In fact, we'll pay you if his compensation fund goes through. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how you would argue that he's not encouraging political violence. Has he inflamed racism, anti-Semitism? Yeah. Dog whistles so loud people can hear him. I don't have any, quotes in front of me, but it's just everything about him is incredibly against anything that's not like him superficially.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Cortez Masto, former Attorney General of Nevada.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing as well. Most importantly, I just have to thank all of you for your courage to be here and continue to use your voices. It's not lost on me that May is National Police Officers Week. And if you've spent any time in Judiciary Square, which I have as an AUSA walking past that national memorial, you recognize that peace officers come from all over to honor those who've made the ultimate sacrifice. But if you walk over there, you also know that there's a quote on one of the walls, and it says, "In valor there is hope." In valor there is hope, and I never forgot that. And I think that's what we see today. My colleague, Senator Blumenthal, asked you if there was hope. He thought there was still hope. By you all being here today, that is our hope. That is our hope. Because there is a challenge that we all have been talking about the rule of law and how it is being abused. And it is so important that those voices, your voices that still care about the rule of law, stand up and push back and advocate for it. And so I just want to say thank you. As somebody not only is a career prosecutor, but married to a law enforcement officer, I thank you so much. At the end of the day, what you are doing is so courageous. Let me ask you this, 2 questions I have though. We talked about the effect of these pardons, but talk to me about trust, right? Because as a prosecutor, as a law enforcement officer, part of really the role that you have is to build the trust with the community. And that is, to me, one of the most important things. And do you feel that what is happening now because of these pardons and because of the ignorance and the willing to ignore the rule of law, that we are also now really jeopardizing that public trust with law enforcement and prosecutors? I'm curious how you feel about that. Officer Daniel, we'll talk with you first. Hodges.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is fundamental to a functioning society, and I don't see how anyone could not have had their trust damaged in the federal government, at least by this administration. These horrific, as far as I can tell, illegal human trafficking of individuals to prisons in El Salvador by federal agents. And I somehow have to still defend myself as a police officer and the work I do because of that. That even though there's no connection there between me and them, it absolutely hurts trust in local law enforcement.
Yeah.
So all these things make it more difficult to do my job. And because we need the trust of the community to do our jobs.
Thank you.
As a prosecutor, I'm sure you know, part of what we do is we have to have the trust of the victims that we are prosecuting cases for, because their testimony is important to be able to bring those cases forward. Having things like this happen where a case is wiped away, where there are victims involved, makes it that victims are less likely to trust prosecutors to do the thing that they're supposed to do. And having someone like Ed Martin in control in Washington, D.C. makes it that the city of Washington, D.C. is less safe, and the people are less likely to trust the people that are supposed to be prosecuting the cases that are to protect them.
I think Ms. Levine took the words right out of my mouth, so I'll come at this from a different angle. One of the other ways that it is important for us to have trust is to have the trust of the judiciary. Appearing in court on behalf of the United States, I always felt that we were held to tremendously high standards, and so judges took our word seriously. If we made a representation to a judge, if we assured them that certain facts were true, if we made an argument, they took it more seriously because of the weight of the authority of the United States behind us. When we have prosecutors or representatives of the Justice Department refusing to answer the judge's questions, failing at their basic duties of candor to the court, telling the judge false information, that absolutely undermines the ability of any prosecutor anywhere in the United States to do their job effectively.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you. I don't think we have to worry about the trust being shattered. I mean, it already is. Any prosecution against any person of any political party is already looked at as weaponized. I mean, I've heard that word more than I've cared to weaponize. Everything is weaponized against this person, that person. So that's when you get down to the facts. I mean, let's be very factual about the things that are happening. I had the opportunity of being in Reno a couple of weeks ago, presenting a resolution in front of the legislature out there, condemning what happened on January 6th. I was very matter of fact. It wasn't my opinion. On January 6th, people attacked police officers, and that's not okay. Donald Trump pardoned people who attacked police officers. That's not okay. And almost every Republican out there voted against the resolution. And I mean, how can you have trust when you can't even acknowledge just the facts of something? So I think the trust is already fractured. I don't know if it's beyond repair, but I think, you know, individuals that are sitting before you now are committed to doing whatever we can do to keep and help restore the public trust.
Yeah, thank you. And then just one quick question, because I think I get asked this question as well as an attorney. So for Sarah and Mike, let me just ask you this. Attorneys they violate the law, they can be held accountable. Rules of professional conduct, prosecutors' conduct. Literally, if you go too far as an attorney, whether you're the U.S. attorney, or AUSA, or prosecuting, or anywhere, your bar license can be taken away if you violate those professional rules of conduct. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, and because of that, is that part of the reason why you left? Because you didn't want to violate those ethical rules? And should that be an area, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but it is an area that I believe as attorneys we should be held accountable to, and every attorney across this country should know that if they do violate those rules, there is accountability. It's not often used, but it is something that is a tool to be out there for many to recognize is available.
So I was fired, so I didn't have the opportunity to resign. I think if I had stayed at the Justice Department, there would certainly be ethical concerns that would have been brought forward that I would have felt that I would have been obligated to resign at some point because of that. Having those ethical responsibilities are so important. It's what makes us able to do the things that we do, and especially for prosecutors, because we can take away someone's liberty, it's extra important. So it's something that absolutely is something, I think that's probably one of the considerations that some people have had when they have left the Justice Department, is that they've resigned to protect that integrity and to protect their ethics.
I think that was the case, in fact, for some of the people whose names have come up earlier in this hearing. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Welch.
Well, I came because I wanted to say thank you. It's incredibly frustrating. This should be a full hearing with the full committee where all of us are expressing our gratitude to folks who did their jobs, and all of us are expressing outrage at the erosion of the rule of law. So one of the things that you all committed to was, and showed respect for, was trust that the Attorney General here is talking about. So I don't have so many questions as much as I do have an expression of gratitude. And the thing that's so difficult is that the world is upside down right now. I mean, you were talking about how seriously judges would take representatives of the U.S. government, and we're seeing now in a particular case that U.S. attorneys who are appearing won't answer a question asked by the judge about what is the position of the government or what is the efforts that they have been making in order to comply with the judicial order. It's an astonishing thing. I was a public defender and in court all of the time. I just can imagine how painful that is. And law enforcement, it's unbelievable for us. We walk around all the time. We've got this man out here. Who trained him? It was one of you guys, right? This wonderful man here? That was you. Well, you did a good job. You did a good job. But it's a tradition and a culture that you're passing down to the young attorneys in your office or the new officers who are coming in. And it's so cool. We walk around here and we just totally take our safety for granted, right? And we did that before, and we still do it after January 6th. But every one of the folks that was working with you on January 6th, I mean, God knows what they went through. And, you know, normally there'd just be such gratitude as there is, I think, from the members for what you did. And you're looking at a world where the bad guys won. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And that's hard to live with. And I guess the one observation I'll make, and then a question for you to comment on, it's really tough for people in this country right now. I mean, you were at a special moment in our history where you were required to do special things, and you stood up and did them. So no matter how upside down it is, each of you has the satisfaction that your kids and grandkids are going to be so proud that they're connected to you. That's going to be real in your legacy. But the thing is, right now, where the outcome of our democracy is a jump ball, the question is, how do we all carry on? So given that you had a front row seat, how do you guys carry on? Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Senator. The hardest thing, I guess, it would have been harder for me to not say anything and speak up and attend these hearings and continue to speak out. Listen, a lot of time, it's been over 4 years talking about January 6th. And even to this point now, a lot of times we're not out there bringing it up. We're responding to people trying to diminish and whitewash it. And I think that's what shows the courage, the braveness of the individuals that are sitting here. They're standing up and pushing back. I mean, yes, we all know that we hated it and it was wrong. But the fact that individuals are still trying to minimize and whitewash, and our job, we say our responsibility, the requirement to do what's right, is to push back against that. And I think that's what's important. That's what keeps me going, because that's what keeps me going.
You look great.
Thank you. You do too.
Senator, when I think back to January 6th, the reason that I spoke up, the reason that I asked about what we were doing was because the thought of the department doing nothing seemed like such a failure to me. I was very afraid that people would leave Washington, D.C. and face no consequences, and that was what motivated me to call my colleagues and ask, is there any response to this? What are people doing about it? And I think the same thing is motivating me to be here today, that I realize no longer working for the Justice Department, in some ways I have a privilege to be able to speak that people who are still there can't for fear of being fired, given the way that the Attorney General and many people beneath her have signaled that dissent is not to be tolerated. And so I think the thing for people to do, people who have the capacity, people who have the ability, is to continue to speak. That's all we have.
Thank you. Sarah?
So after I was fired, I was immediately hired by a prosecutor's office in Virginia. So I continue to prosecute cases and try to work for the rule of law in every way that I can. And when I have the opportunity to speak out, I continue to speak out, because the only way that we fix the problems is that we continue to talk about them.
Something that I'm proud about from my work on January 6th is the fact that it never even crossed my mind to give up, to run away.
Wow.
It wasn't until years later, I think someone mentioned it, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I could have done that, but it's just not within me to do that. The question was, how do you carry on? I carry on because the alternative is untenable. Because just giving up and ceding this country to these terrible people, it's not, even if it's a losing fight, I'll still fight the fight. You don't fight because of the odds of winning. You fight because it's the right thing to do, and therein lies valor.
Right.
So I carry on because I can't not.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for coming. You are not just witnesses to history, you are history. You lived it. You lived the aftermath of it as well. I can't think of another event in my lifetime that has been subject to such historic revisionism, where new people to this administration are trying to rewrite what happened on January 6th. They've got a problem. We've got videotape and we have memories. And those of us who were in the building know what we saw and know what we lived through. And now to characterize this as some Mardi Gras event or some love and happiness event doesn't reflect the reality. I thought they were going to kill you, Officer Hodges, honest to God. I look at those films now, those videos now, and
I had the honor of attending Brian Sicknick's memorial as he lay in the state, and I saluted his remains and thought to myself, there but for the grace of God go I.
Right.
You're exactly right. And because the event was of such gravity and such historic importance, we cannot let the truth die. We have to come together regularly and tell the truth to the American people. Let them hear the history, let them see the history of that moment. I think that's the only way a democracy can survive, is with the truth related to the history of our country. And there's a feeling of justice that requires it as well. Shame on us if we just shut up and let them retell this story. 140 men and women in uniform risked their lives just as you did for us. And I don't take that for granted. I think that's very serious. I owe it to my kids and grandkids to do everything I can to make sure that story is told, and our gratitude to you is remembered. And your situation, Ms. Levine, Mr. Romano, continues in this committee. The man who came to the office of U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and dismissed you from your responsibilities now seeks a higher office in our government. And before he would achieve that, I want the truth to be told. as to what he has said and what he has done. And believe me, it's voluminous. We have reviewed his record and of some 1,900 events that we asked him about. 1,900. He failed to give a response in 400 cases. No response. 400. We looked at all the questionnaires for U.S. attorneys in the past. We can't find one with more than 8 or 10 similar situations. He had 400 things he didn't disclose to us. Well, we are urging this Judiciary Committee to have a full hearing with Mr. Martin under oath. And when we do, and we ask the questions, have a chance to ask the questions, trust me, your experience and what you've told us today will be part of that questioning. It is a critical element in his worthiness to be promoted to this new position. So this is not just a show hearing. This is the real thing as far as I'm concerned, because you are the real thing. You are history, and thank God you were there. I'm going to ask now that we stand adjourned. Thanks, Senator Cortez Masto, Senator Welch. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much.